delivered, praise the Lord. I've been delivered, praise the Lord. I've been delivered by His blood. Oh, I was bound by the chains of Satan. I've been delivered, He set me free. He set me free, yes, He set me free. He broke the bonds of prison for me. I'm glory bound, my Jesus to see. Glory to God, He set me free. Amen. Jefferson, go ahead and open us up in prayer, please.
Good morning. Happy Mother's Day. Good to have you all out today. So we want 3 John chapter 3 John verse 2. If somebody could get that for us, that's our base text, Jefferson. All right. And then just a couple more. Proverbs 23, 6 and 7, Keith. Proverbs 21, 5. Richard, Proverbs 28, 19. Anthony. And that should hold us for the time being. Okay, so last week we were looking, the overall topic is kingdom prosperity. And we were looking at the spiritual reality behind poverty. And we explored that from Scripture. We explored the idea of a curse and the curse of generations. That's one of the causes of the curse. Then we saw the issue can be sin, either personal sin or the sins of our fathers. And we also saw that it can be just an unrighteous demonic assault, that the devil doesn't play fair, he doesn't abide by the rules. And so even if you don't open a door, even if you're not responsible for things that have come on you, or even your parents aren't responsible, the devil will still attack your finances. And so we talked about breaking the curse. We saw that it requires what you say, it requires prayer, and it requires faith. And without addressing those issues in your life, you're probably going to continue to have a very difficult struggle with poverty. You have to watch what you say. You have to give yourself to aggressive warfare kind of prayer. And you have to have faith that God can overcome demonic resistance and change your circumstances. Because that's what God does. That's why many of us have a testimony that our lives are blessed. When we came into the kingdom, our lives were not blessed, they were cursed. But God reversed the curse because that's what He does. And so today we're going to look into something that overlaps because the spiritual affects the material. So there's going to be some overlapping in what we discuss, but we want to talk about mindsets of poverty, the way we think. So let's just get our base text first, 3 John verse 2.
Beloved, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health, just as your soul prospers.
Here's a Spirit-anointed, Spirit-suggested, Spirit-inspired. That's probably the best word. A Spirit-inspired prayer that God led John to pray this specific way. I want you to be prosperous, even as your soul is prosperous. I want your health, I want your finances, I want your life to thrive and be prosperous, even as your saved soul is prospering. And so with that in mind, we are asking the question, okay, we're praying that God will do this. What can we contribute to the pursuit of this prosperity? So another area that will fight against your prosperity is your mind. You have to understand your mind is an incredibly powerful thing. And no one really can explain the mind. It's not your brain. Your brain is an organ. Your mind is a combination of factors, and it has powerful characteristics. It can project, it can imagine, it can weigh, and it can judge, and it can discern. And all of these things are the function of your mind, but they are also connected to your heart. Your heart and your mind. I think it was Pastor Smart preached on this a couple of weeks ago. I've preached on it a number of times. The heart-mind connection. That this is a big picture. It really defines who we are internally, who we are by nature, right? Your mind, your heart, they define you. Those are the things that are going to endure forever. Your body is going to turn to dust, but your internal being is what's going to survive, and that's your mind, your soul, your heart. This is all woven together in a very holistic way. So your mind will have a huge impact on the direction of your life. And if we say that, then a sub-statement of that is it will have a huge impact on your finances. The way you think about money, the way you think about money in the context of your life and your experience. All of these things are going to have a huge impact on how you deal with your money, what you do with your money, how you prosper or don't prosper. This is how we've got to understand finances. There's this spiritual part, and woven into that is our thinking. Proverbs 23, 6 and 7.
Do not eat the bread of a miser, nor desire his delicacies. For as he thinks in his heart, so is he. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you.
For as he thinks in his heart. Was there more? Verse 7, or was that 6 and 7? Okay. As he thinks in his heart, there's that interplay between the heart and the mind, but it starts with the mind. Ultimately, your heart will be swayed, directed, turned by your thinking. You can have a generous heart. That might be something that God has placed in you, something that developed in your character and your personality early on. But then you go through some experiences and you start thinking a different way, and the next thing you know, your heart isn't like that. You don't have that. Here we have a man who is a miser. This is the way he thinks about money. I got to collect. I've got to hold on to. I don't want to give away. I don't want anyone to be blessed by my money. And so he comes across as a liberal man. Eat. But the whole time you're eating, he's mad at you because you're eating his food and you're absorbing his wealth. And every bite of that donut you eat, he thinks there goes 5 cents. Right? And so materially, outwardly, you wouldn't know what he's thinking. But who he is based on what he's thinking. And this is why the wise man in Proverbs, Solomon, says, if he offers you his dainties, don't eat them. Because this is going to have an adverse effect on your relationship. This is going to have an adverse effect. You're going to become this guy's enemy. Because of the way he thinks. Because his attitude towards money is affecting his life and his relationships. It has to do with what he thinks, not with what he says. We're all politicians at heart. And we will say things that we don't really mean. They're not really what we think. And so we have to be aware of this when we're thinking about finances. How do we really think about finances? What is your mindset? Proverbs 21:5.
Good planning and hard work lead to prosperity, but hasty shortcuts lead to poverty.
Good planning. That's thinking. That's projecting. That's weighing the various dynamics and making a good plan, having a good plan. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but how many of you have a good plan about your wealth, about your finances, about how you're going to get ahead? All too often, we simply live day to day. We don't make plans. We don't really have an understanding of planning, of thinking through financial realities. We don't think about investment. We don't think about compound interest. We don't think about the value of money and how it must be invested in to gain it. We just view money in a very casual way. Many people are looking for financial shortcuts. There's an entire industry. People get rich off of people's desire to get rich. Plans of the diligent, people who are paying attention, people who are taking care of business, that's what the diligent are. They lead to plenty because they're thinking ahead. But people who don't invest in thinking about it, go for the get-rich quick schemes. We all have emails coming in that tell us, buy this stock. Why would anybody send you, a complete stranger, an inside track on a stock purchase? Well, because they understand they can get 100,000 stupid people to put their money into this stock. It's going to drive the price up. He's already bought low. It's going to go high. He's going to sell all his stock off, and you're left with a worthless stock. Is that how it works? Yeah, that's why you haven't got rich yet. Because you keep buying stocks that aren't going to help you. He says, if you plan, if you think about this, then you'll have plenty. But he who chases fantasies, that's another mind thing, isn't it? This is the way I think about my money. I think that I'm talented and therefore the world is going to recognize me one of these days. Because I'm just oozing with talent and I can rap, right? I can rap. And so I'm going to be a rich rapper someday. Probably not. Probably not. You don't know the right producers. You don't know the right gangsters. And the truth of the matter is you're a lousy rapper. And if you were a great rapper, you would have already been discovered and on your way to becoming a homosexual. I'm going to be an influencer. You can't even influence your pet dog. But you're going to influence the whole world. Because why? What makes you think that you're going to be an influencer? Well, it's called fantasy. I want to wake up rich. That's a fantasy, right? I had a friend who was actually prospering because he worked hard He built a company, and then he bought into an emailed Nigerian oil well scheme. Listen, I'm not prejudiced, but stay away from Nigerian schemes. Nigerian money schemes are so well known that I actually saw in an airport, I was watching a CNN special on Nigerian money schemes. I'm thinking, whoa, that's crossing certain cultural lines. You're actually calling out a certain group of people and saying they are fundamentally dishonest. Well, if people are fundamentally dishonest enough, eventually they're going to wear the jacket, right? Paul said that Cretans are all slow bellies and something else. Can't remember what he said, but he didn't like Cretans very much. Why? Because as a cultural group, they had a reputation, and this is the way they behaved themselves. So this guy gets an email from a Nigerian. All you need to do is invest, and he described the whole process to me. And it really was a well-planned scheme, but the reason why he was open to it was because he wanted fast money. He'd already worked hard and built up money. He knew the hard way. He knew it worked. But now, isn't there an easier way to do this? There is no easier way to do this. Let me just tell you, flat out, there is no easy way to prosper. The Bible actually says dishonest gain will turn to gravel in your mouth. So even if you do pull it off, even if you do find the easy path, it's going to blow up. That money will disappear. Why? Because you haven't learned anything about the value of money in that process. All you've done is got quick money, and you blow quick money because it has no value to you. The next thing you know, you're driving expensive cars and you got big fancy rings and you're broke. Las Vegas is a fantasy. When I first came here, the first time I came, the pastor that was here took me to the Mirage. And I said, that's appropriate. The Mirage. This whole city is the Mirage. It's out in the desert. It promises you quick money. And I know very, very, very few people who have left Las Vegas rich. Very few. I know tons that have left Las Vegas poor. And we talked about it, I think, last week, the difference on the airplane coming in and going out. Coming in, everybody's a joke a minute. Going out, the plane is quiet. Right? You would think there'd be somebody on that plane going, dude, I scored. No, a plane full of 300 people, nobody scored. Because that's the way it works. Las Vegas didn't become the capital of graft and money by letting people win fairly. Amen. Jasmine.
When I used to work at the casinos, and it's funny because they don't mention this in the news or anything, but a lot of people that would come, they would kill themselves in the rooms.
Right.
And we would be the first ones to encounter these murders or suicide or people jumping off the building because we're the first ones in their room.
Yep.
And they would leave notes of why they killed themselves. And a lot of the times it's because they lost everything.
Yeah.
And they can't go home and face the reality that they've gambled all their money.
Yeah. If you come to Vegas, you are 4 times more likely to commit suicide just by coming to Vegas. If you live in Vegas, you're 7 times more likely to commit suicide.
And they were never, you don't see this in the news
No.
because it's not good.
Not conducive to business.
Right, but then we would be the ones, having to deal with, well, obviously we didn't do the cleanup after, there's a suicide or something, special people come in, but it always reminded me of Las Vegas. It's nice and pretty on the outside, but within these walls,
it's a nasty place. And so the bottom line is, why do people come to Vegas by the millions? When I first moved here, they were averaging 42 million tourists a year. That's almost 1 million tourists a week. I don't know if we're back up to that number since COVID or not, but I know that we're moving in that direction. Millions and millions of people come here. And they all know the reality, but they will put on blinders and they will come expecting to get rich. Why? This is a poverty mindset. It's a mindset of I'm going to get wealth in my own way. I'm not going to follow God's pattern for wealth. I'm going to get wealth with a roll of the dice. I'm going to be the rapper. I'm going to be the influencer. I'm going to get wealth some other way than faith, hard work, faithfulness, generosity, all the principles that go into prosperity. I'm going to beat all of that. And I'm going to get wealth a different way. And as I said a moment ago, even if you do hit the jackpot, even if you get wealth, boom, it'll be gone. Most people who win the lottery are broke in a year, statistically. They win millions of dollars and they're broke in a year. You can't even figure that out. It's a poverty mindset. I saw a couple other hands. Terry and then Jeff.
Yeah, Pastor, whenever I have friends or relatives come to town, wanting to gamble on us, the only thing I tell them is we got to remember one thing: Vegas wasn't built on winners.
That's right. Vegas wasn't built on winners. Jeff.
So I have a question. So obviously the poverty spirit of trying to get rich, like we've witnessed building casinos, people have snuck on our job site and try to jump off our crane, die because they've lost all their money. I get the poverty spirit, but is that linked to depression? I mean, because usually if you want to commit suicide, it has a result of depression, correct?
Yeah.
So does poverty spirit link to depression?
Well,
or
yeah.
Vice versa?
I don't know a lot of impoverished people that are real happy. And now, mark it down. I'm talking about impoverished people. I'm talking about people with a poverty spirit. Remember, we define poverty as an inability to thrive, an inability to grow and to see life. I know literally thousands of people who, by American standards, live in poverty. I travel all over the third world. And there are people in these countries that you and I would call impoverished. They are not impoverished. They thrive. They don't have the same kind of money we have. But poverty isn't just money. I mentioned this, I think, last week or the week before, is you can be incredibly wealthy and still be impoverished and have a poverty spirit. All right? So, depression would be linked to a poverty spirit. We will see in just a moment, it can also feed a poverty spirit. And so, that's the problem. We get into this holistic reality of spirit, material things, the mind, the heart. There's a lot of interaction between all of these. And so what we're really wanting to do this morning, we're aware that there's a spiritual dimension that we have to address, but we also need to be aware that there is a mental arena that we have to address in ourselves about the way we think about money and the way we think about poverty. Okay, Aaron.
I can actually attest to fast money going fast. I grew up in LA. A lot of people knew that I did sell drugs for a time in my life, and I remember being able to work with an older friend of mine and can make upwards of $10,000 in a night. And when I got saved, I didn't have a penny, nothing to my name at all, and everything went on clothes, friends, and everything else, and it just disappears as fast as I got it. It would disappear within 2 to 3 days of me actually getting it.
Right, because you didn't see the value of money. You thought money was just to throw around. Money was to impress people. Money was to buy your friends stuff so they would like you. All of these things that people do with money that have nothing to do with what money really is. It's the way they think. It's the way we think. We have to be aware of patterns of thought that perpetuate poverty. Okay? Sam.
Yeah, it was interesting that the mind-body-soul connection affects your finances, but you think that also affects your health. As you think negative thoughts all the time, it's going to affect your body and disease and all kinds of other things too. Huh?
Yeah, we are holistic creatures. So in this arena of poverty, people who have a poverty spirit, people who live in poverty, have a process of thinking that is peculiar to them. Ruby Payne wrote a fascinating book. It's called Understanding Poverty, and the subtitle is A Cognitive Approach. So this woman is not a Christian. She's a social worker. She says in the introduction to the book that she has used an anthropological model to draw the conclusions that she's come to. That simply means to study humans, society, the way people function. That's what anthropological means. An anthropologist is always trying to get their head around, why do islanders wear coconuts? Where did these customs come from? All of these thoughts. That's the realm of anthropologists. So she took that model. She's not a Christian, as I said, but in her book she builds this case that poverty is a mindset, a cognitive approach, the way you think. Poverty is a cognitive issue. This is her conclusion. She points out that people in poverty think differently. They think differently than people who have wealth. They have different rules as to how they play the game. And it's informed by the poverty that they live in. They have different vocabularies. Pastor Looney was talking about change the word, change the way people think. Change the outcome. He's talking about that in our discipleship class. And so here's this issue of the way we speak. We touched on that when we talked about faith. Okay? And so these are things that people in poverty develop. It's a culture they embrace. She speaks of resources. She recognizes that poverty is a lack of resources. Okay? And those resources are not just money. When we think of resources, we think of money. But she speaks of resources as relationships. She speaks of social resources. She speaks of generational resources having to do with what we learn from our families. Spiritual resources, not a Christian, but she recognizes spiritual resources. I'll read you a quote in that department a little later on. She talks about emotional resources, right? Your ability to deal and to cope with things. These all play a part in poverty. And poverty ultimately is defined by how you think in all of these different facets of life. How you think about it. Poverty is a way of thinking. It's the way you see yourself. It's the way you see the world. It's the way you see society, the way you see your family, the way you see the people at church, the way you see the world at large and how you fit into that. And that determines many, many times how you deal with money and what you expect of money. There are some fundamental questions that we all have to ask ourselves when it comes to money. What should I have? Should I have less than I have? Should I have more than what I have? That's a question, right? How much should I have? What should I be able to expect in life? What is money for? What is the purpose of the money that I have? What should I do with the money that I have? This is all stuff that's in the mental realm that affects how you deal with money. Where does financial success come from? How do you become successful? How do you increase wealth? Can you be financially confident in life, or is being insecure the norm? Is that the way people live? Because money is this ethereal, mystical thing, and you're never sure how it's going to play out. You're never sure how your investment, you're never sure about anything when it comes to money, right? These are questions that you have to ask about money. And if you don't ask those questions, you're going to end up probably incorrectly answering those questions, and a spirit of poverty always comes up with the wrong answer for the question. Always. Invariably, it's looking at life the wrong way. I saw a hand. Tarek.
Something that I've been noticing lately is that all the most rich people, the richest people I've met, not saying that they're super rich, but what I've noticed about like business owners and a lot of these people like that I've met throughout my life, if you talk to them, they're very like cavalier about a lot of things. They can't spell, they can't write a lot of things. They need help from everybody. Sometimes I used to work for a guy, Bill Adamick, and not saying I'm not degrading him as a person, but something you know is you're just like, yeah, it's just, what's so special about? And there's some other people like my mom's boss, Rich. I mean, he probably at least has $100 million. He has like 20 companies. Guys but you meet him and he's just like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you wonder, and then I meet like my brother, he's an accountant, really smart. You meet really people are meticulously smart, nerds, but they just work a regular job. And I wonder why these kind of cavalier, they just get things done, but somehow they're just these really wealthy folks. And I don't know if you ever noticed that or could maybe help me understand that. Or have you ever seen that yourself? I see it all the time, so.
Well, as the group The Dead Presidents once sang, everybody knows the world is full of stupid people. And so the bottom line is that we're dealing with a vast subject here. You can identify certain things that you view as mental deficiencies or important things that you think they should have worked out, but they don't. But I would dare say that if you really began to dig into their work ethic and you really began to dig into their expectations and you really began to dig into their relationships, you would find that they are miles ahead of most people, right? Most wealthy people, now, obviously, there are whole categories of people that wouldn't fit into this statement. But most wealthy people are very good with people. They have great people skills, right? The ones that don't usually end up blowing up. Somewhere along the line, maybe they've been able to accumulate wealth, but that wealth will disappear because they'll come into a hard situation and nobody has their back because they've ruined every relationship they have. So all I can tell you is that people that you might say, well, how did they get wealthy? We're going to be looking into some of the principles that help in thriving and prospering. And then again, you get into the whole spiritual realm. The question is, why does anybody win in Las Vegas? Right? Well, because that's the only way you can keep them coming back. That's the only way you can keep the suckers coming back. So you got to let somebody win. So there's the devil involved in all of this as well. That I've seen the devil make people wealthy, right? So there's a lot of factors here. Let's try let's try to follow the course. Hopefully we can answer these questions as we go along. Raul.
So my question is, do you believe that the system is designed to keep people poor? In other words, going to school, the system tells you go to school, go to college, and in reality, even like Tarek said, the majority of people that are truly wealthy are entrepreneurs, not people that go and became a worker.
Okay, the system, in the end, doesn't control wealth. It's God that gives wealth. And he overcomes any system. So we're going to look at that. Part of our problem when we're talking about poverty mindsets is victimology. It's the system. Okay, so it's not the system. Now, you're wording it in a slightly nuanced way. And that is the system defined by paths to wealth. And I believe that the problem with what you're calling the system is it doesn't incorporate all the factors. It only incorporates some of them. I don't think you need to go to college to be successful, but I do think that if you're going to pursue a career in astrophysics, you probably ought to go to college. Or brain surgery, or a lot of things that really do require that you follow a certain path to get there. Again, you're basing, you're one of the older guys here in the church. You're not old yet, but you still fall into a category where truthfully a college education was helpful. Now a college education is simply indoctrination unless you know what you're going for and you're smart enough to get past the teachers that are simply trying to jack you up. I do believe that right now, in the last 2 decades, things have happened in America that are radical, and the system has changed radically. And they have co-opted the system to attack personal wealth. That is true. So part of the answer is yes, and part of the answer is no. Because at the end of the day, as I said, it's not the system that has the last word. It's God who gives power to get wealth. But you've got to believe that. You've got to have faith for that, and you've got to have a mindset, and we're going to look at that. Okay? So poverty mindsets answer all the questions about money wrong. It doesn't see money the way we should see money. So where do poverty mindsets come from? How do we get these incorrect ideas? And we're going to define those a little better as we move on. But where do these perspectives of money come from that thwart prosperity and thriving? The first would be past traumatic experiences with money. Some people grew up or experienced a period of hellacious financial problems, financial trauma. And this used to be very common. The problem is we're running out of people who lived through the Great Depression. They're all dead. All right? But if you talked to people who went through the Great Depression, many of them were traumatized by this. They experienced starvation. They experienced losing everything that they have. They experienced homelessness. They experienced really challenging financial realities. And the end result of that was a very fearful, very protective mindset about finances. My grandparents went through the Great Depression. My dad went through it as a kid. He wasn't quite as impacted because kids, they're completely unconscious of their context. But my grandparents had to deal with the realities of the Great Depression. And my grandmother, she had a closet full of Cool Whip containers and plastic things, We're going to need these, because we got to store stuff. We got to have stuff to store stuff because they're going to come and take all our stuff away. And there was a mindset, very, very fearful. In some contexts, it actually may have been helpful because it taught people how to save. But when that crosses a certain line, it becomes hoarding. And we all know about hoarders, right? They actually had I've read they had a TV show on hoarders. TV is such a weird thing. They'll make a TV show about anything. And so this one was about hoarders, people who have filled their house up with junk. Why do they do that? Because they think, someday I'm going to need this. This is important to my future welfare. And they live in constant fear because of a trauma, because of a loss, because they've gone through something that threw a switch in the way they think, and they're terrified that they're going to have to go through that difficult time again, that they're going to face starvation, homelessness, loss again. This can also be generated by parents who are always in conflict together about money. They're always fighting over money. This can traumatize a child who sees money is what's blowing my family up. Money is the big problem. So now they have a mindset about money. The view of money becomes emotional and it becomes defensive. We're no longer thinking practically, strategically. We're thinking emotionally, right? And let me tell you something about salesmen. Salesmen know that. They know that most people think about money emotionally. My wife and I, when we first got married, we're just barely getting by. We don't have a lot of discretionary income. This guy comes along and persuades us that if we'll buy into this photography club thing, I can't remember the details of it. All I remember is that you'll have memories and you'll have pictures of your children. And years from now, those pictures are going to be worth more than the small investment you're going to put into this. And we could not afford it, but we bought into it for a little while. There was a monthly stipend. I don't remember how it all played out, but I do remember there came a point where we said, nah, that's not part of the budget. Right? But how did they get us into that? Because neither one of us were big picture takers. But it was so smooth. It was like, yeah, but your children, and you're gonna need this someday. And I didn't have any pictures of anybody, so it kind of made sense. It was like, yeah, well, I wish I had a picture of my grandmother, right? So they know about emotions. That's why they put you in a new car, right? Instead of just going over, well, this car does this and that and this and it has that. They put you in the car. Smell that new leather. Come on, man. Take it for a spin, right? All of this is emotional. This has nothing to do with does it fit in my budget? Is this the best car I could buy for the money? None of that's relevant. The only thing that's relevant is how do you feel sitting behind the wheel of this new car? I feel like I want it. Right? It's all emotion. In the realm of poverty, emotion is a key player. Richard. Both Richards.
So I have a problem with paying bills. So when it's time to pay bills, my wife, okay, we need to pay this. But inside my heart, my mind, I don't know what it is, but it irks me. I'm like, why? I mean, I don't make great money, but we can't pay the light bills, water bills, all the necessities. But what is it? Why am I bothered by it? Can you explain that?
Maybe you should come up and lie down on a couch. It's mildly neurotic. I'm not sure what to say to that. Richard, we create our bills. You don't owe anything that you didn't create, you didn't purchase. You used the electricity, you have to pay for it. You rent a house, you have to pay for it. You bought a car, you have to pay for it. And you say, I don't like that. And my advice is move onto the street. There's a lot of homeless people that never pay any bills. And I've actually, listen to me, I've talked to some of them, and they say that's why they're on the street. I don't want the responsibility. I don't want to have to pay bills. They've said that to me. And so I guess that's a choice. I guess good on you. Just don't put a tent up in my front yard. Right? Because this moves into another poverty spirit that we'll talk about in a moment, poverty mindset. But yeah, I don't know. All I can tell you is maybe what you want to do is flip the switch, and when the bill comes in, be excited that God gave me the money to pay this bill. I am such a blessed person because I have the benefit of electricity, and God gave me the money that I can cover it. I can pay for it. I win, right? It's kind of a perception thing.
So it's not like a poverty mindset.
Well, it might be, you know. It might be, because you might have some financial trauma in the background that the idea of letting go of money bothers you. If I have to let go of my money, even if it's legit, I'm letting go of my money. And if I let go of enough money, I'll be back where I started. I'll be poor again. That's trauma. And that's emotional. So yeah, it is a poverty way of thinking.
Yeah, I was gonna say, going back to the emotion part of it, I used to work at, a luxury dealership, and, a lot of these people, they can barely afford the lease payment, yet alone the repairs on the car. So I'd often wonder, why did you even buy this? And it goes back to the sales and marketing concept that people buy things off of emotion, but they justify it with logic.
Yeah.
And that's what they do all the time.
But they justify it with bad logic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So we've all read stories of very wealthy people living in poverty conditions. We've read stories of the bum who died on the park bench, and once they started digging around, he had $1 million in the bank. Right? That's a poverty mindset. That's a fear of letting go and using money the way it was meant to be used. And so I'm going to hold on to every nickel because I don't want to let go of anything. Yeah, Karen.
Could it also be, for me, I felt like I've always kind of been, I was in accounting for a long time, but I also think that, do you think that could also be like a poverty mindset when you attach emotional attachment to the money? Like for me, it wasn't so much the not having it, but it was so much that if I was having a bad day or if I was going through something, instead of kind of fixing it, I would go and I would buy all these things.
Right.
And then I'm left with
yeah,
all these nice things, but they're just there.
but I can't pay rent.
Kind of feel like an emotional,
Yeah.
like an emotional impulse that I would have.
Yeah. It's you're meeting emotional needs the wrong way. And we're going to get to that. We're always going to get to stuff. Sooner or later, we're going to get to that. But I have in my notes the idea of the way we feel about ourselves being attached to our money. And so when we have nice things, that makes us feel better and more important and good about ourselves. And somehow we've attached our personal worth to money. And so, yeah, that's an emotional trap. Yeah, Gene. Harold. Well, Gene raised your hand too, didn't you? No, just Harold. Okay.
Well, speaking for myself, I've actually worked for $1 a month in prison. All right. So today I have a new look on how I handle my money. I'm blessed to be able to save, and I never saved in my life. I never had a bank account, man. But today I do. When I first got out of prison, I took my money to the bank, and they sent it back to me in a check because they didn't want my business. But today I have the mindset that what I have to do is tithe first, pay my bills, Richard, save, and give my wife an allowance. The rest of the money is just in the bank. If I need it, I know it's there, but it's there to pay bills. It's not for me to spend frivolously.
Yes.
I used to spend frivolously.
Yes.
I've never had nothing that I called my own. What I had, I got from someone else.
Yes.
But the Lord has changed my heart and mind to see money in a different situation. If you look at my wallet, I don't have a penny. But I know my bills are paid. I'm not hungry. My car is full.
And you got some in the bank.
I got some in the bank.
This is what a tremendous testimony. And I want you to see the shift that happened mentally, the way he looks at things, the way he processes money and its purpose, its value. All of that has changed in the way he thinks. So that is a spiritual transformation. It started with conversion, but it affected the mind. It affected the way he thinks about money. And the end result is very good. Diana.
Well, this will encourage Gail. I'm actually reading a book. I bought one.
Yay!
Anyway, it's small, but it's a guy's
3
testimony. Yeah, it's a guy's testimony. And when you were talking to Rich, it really kind of resonated because he said that he was a minister, and this is way back before I was born, but he said that God started dealing with him. Every morning he hated getting up. And he'd just be like, oh, I just want to go back to sleep. And God started dealing with him to be grateful for everything. So he was molly grubbing that he's got to get up. Every morning he was like this. And God's like, checked him. Like, you need to be grateful that you can get up. He said, so in the morning when he woke, God spoke to him, can you sit up? And he says, yes, Lord, I can sit up. Can you stand up? And he's like, yes, Lord, I can stand up. He's like, can you wiggle your toes? Yes, Lord, I can wiggle my toes. Can you move your head? And he's like, yes, Lord, I can move my head. And God spoke to him. He said, you can either be grateful that you can get up in the morning, or I can put you back in that bed where you can't wiggle your toes, you can't move your head, you can't. And it just basically checked him like, you know what? I gave you all the ability. And I was just really convicted because everything that we can do, work and pay our bills, is a gift from God. And we, gratitude really probably affects everything. And so it really checked me reading that. Yeah. Like all the things I complain about, I really should be grateful.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is gratitude? It's a mindset. It's a way of looking at life. You can look at life without a shred of gratitude, and you'll be a miserable human being. Nothing will be any source of joy to you. But when you have gratitude, you realize how much you get free, gratis. And she said, if I had to go through that process every time I got out of bed, it would take me hours just to get to prayer. Okay, move your finger. Okay, let's try that toe. Oh, that toe's not doing too good. The older you get, the more the checklist grows. How's the kidney feeling? Not so good this morning, right? But the truth of the matter is that it really is paying attention to details in life that will produce gratitude. And gratitude, I think, is an essential mindset. I saw another hand. Tony?
What is it when you know you have enough, but there's always this lingering fear of not having enough?
Yeah, that's poverty mindset. You've had experiences where you didn't have enough. And that has glommed onto your ongoing thought processes about money. Yeah, okay, I got it now, but I'm going to lose it. One of these days, I'm not going to have enough. One of these days, because money never sticks around. That's fear. That's a traumatized way of looking at money. And that is a poverty mindset. We talked about learning about money through your family. There's a mindset that you can easily develop based on what you were taught about money. And it can be completely wrong in the way it views money, but it's the way you think because it's the way you were taught. You have come to process money through this wrong perspective. And victimology is often communicated through the family. Entitlement is often communicated through the family. These are ways of thinking that we embrace by what we've been taught. We talked about being taught wrong doctrine, right? That the root of evil is money. And that isn't what the Bible says. The Bible says the root of evil is the love of money, an inordinate lust or affection for money. It doesn't say money is the root of all evil, right? We're taught somehow that it's more spiritual to be impoverished. There are so many scriptures that tell us to be mindful of the poor and that the gospel is for the poor. And the poor factor heavily into the Bible. And then we develop this mindset, well, see, it's better to be poor. In fact, Jesus said, blessed are the poor in spirit. Whole different idea than financially poor. But we've been taught wrong scripturally. I have never met anyone whose spirituality has been improved by poverty. Right? It doesn't work that way. They are better Christians because of the poverty. Now, what I have experienced is Christians that are substandard because of the poverty. They're bitter, they're angry, they're resentful. They got a lot of spiritual problems that the poverty has generated. I've never met a single person who became more spiritual through poverty. Mother Teresa had the most distorted view of life. A very impoverished woman. She thought that was the key to her spirituality. Someone gave her a building so that she could house these orphans. She went in and tore out all the carpet and the plumbing. Well, because that's just materialistic wealth. I don't know. But I think plumbing is a good idea. I think plumbing fosters health. I think plumbing saves our noses. I think plumbing's a great idea. What kind of mindset do you have when you think the plumbing's got to go? I think you're a nut. I don't think that you are spiritually mature. I don't think you have a good concept of who God is, right? Here's a woman who thrives on poverty and made her entire life all about poverty because that's where she felt most comfortable. It's right there. You say, oh, you're being very judgmental. No, I'm just looking at the facts. Anybody who wants to tear out their plumbing is a nut. Spelled with a capital N. U-T. Do I have to spell it out for you? Nut. Scott, last thought.
So, from my mother's upbringing and just things that have gone on, we've gone without lights for a period of time, moving multiple times, this and that. And things always turned out to be okay. We made it through. And like you said, being a kid, you don't really register too much going on. But I see now, as an adult, God has blessed us tremendously. I'm doing well. But that mindset of things end up working out eventually and being optimistic, it can lead me to being irresponsible and making decisions to where we'll be in a situation, but I'm not really stressed because the idea of God's going to come through, it's going to work out, and like money's going to come in. It always finds its way to us, but I'm seeing that, okay, this doesn't have to be it, and trying to unlearn and detach from some of those things. Even though it like seems optimistic, it's still like I'm not really sure how to go about it because it's just this big thing of, okay, past financial traumas and trying to juggle things now and working out of that.
So that's a very, very good example of developing a wrong mindset. It almost sounds spiritual. God's going to come through for us. Well, it's like the old story I heard about a guy who's on the roof of his house in a flood. And a guy comes up with a canoe and he says, jump in, I'll get you to shore. He goes, no, God's going to provide. Right? And then a guy shows up with I think he showed up with a helicopter. No, God's going to provide. And then he drowns and he ends up in heaven and God says, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here for another few years. And he says, well, you were supposed to provide for me. He said, I sent you a canoe and a helicopter. What else am I supposed to do? Right? And so often, God's going to come through is just an excuse for irresponsibility. I'm not properly using what God is giving me, right? And we're going to look at this. This is an entitlement mentality, right? If you will not take care of business, what if Joseph had said, well, God showed us that we're going to have 7 years of fat city and then 7 years of famine. What if he had said, don't worry about the 7 years of famine, God will take care of us? Right? That's just stupid. That's dangerous thinking. So, very good. And great input this morning. We'll pick it up.